How could a nation that had survived the Great War, the Russian Revolution, and the Great Depression be outflanked and defeated in a matter of weeks? The answer lies in the Battle of France, a rapid and brutal campaign that reshaped Europe in the spring of 1940 and set the stage for the continent's darkest years. By May 10, 1940, Adolf Hitler's Wehrmacht, bolstered by the Luftwaffe's air superiority, launched a coordinated invasion across the Low Countries and the French frontier, deploying a new blitzkrieg doctrine that combined armored spearheads, motorized infantry, and close air support to achieve unprecedented speed and shock. The prelude to the invasion began in 1938 with the Munich Agreement, which ceded the Sudetenland to Germany and emboldened Hitler to pursue further territorial ambitions. France, still haunted by the trauma of 1918, relied on a defensive mindset embodied by the Maginot Line, a 200-kilometer fortification along the German border. Yet French high command underestimated the strategic value of mobile warfare, clinging to the belief that static defenses would deter any aggression. On May 9, the German Army Group A, under Generaloberst Gerd von Rundstedt, assembled near the Dutch border, while Army Group B, commanded by Generaloberst Fedor von Bock, massed along the Belgian frontier. Simultaneously, Army Group C, led by General Wilhelm von Leeb, prepared to cross the Meuse River in the Ardennes. The Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, readied 1,600 aircraft for a massive air assault designed to cripple French communications and morale. At 4:35 on May 10, German paratroopers, Volkssturmjäger, seized key bridges at The Hague, Rotterdam, and the Belgian city of Fort Eben-Emael, neutralizing the Dutch and Belgian defenses almost instantly. Within hours, Dutch forces capitulated, and the German 9th Panzer Division surged across the Dutch border, capturing the strategic port of Antwerp. In Belgium, the German 6th Panzer Division breached the Albert Canal, while the 4th Panzer Division advanced toward the fortified city of Liège, bypassing its heavy artillery. The rapid advance forced the French First Army, under General Georges Blanchard, to abandon its forward positions and retreat toward the River Dyle, a line previously deemed defensible. While the Northern armies scrambled, the true shock came from the Ardennes. On May 12, the German 1st Panzer Division, spearheaded by General Erwin Rommel, broke through the dense forest, crossing the Meuse near Sedan with minimal resistance. By May 14, the German panzers had reached the Marne River, threatening the heart of the French defensive network and forcing the British Expeditionary Force, BF, under General Lord Gort to reconsider its position. The BEF, numbering roughly 160,000 troops, had been deployed to support the French along the Dyle, but the sudden German thrust through the Ardennes exposed the BEF's flank. By May 15, the British and French high commands ordered a withdrawal toward the Channel coast, attempting to establish a new defensive line along the Somme. However, German air superiority, demonstrated by the relentless sorties of the Luftwaffe's Jagdgeschwader 2 and 27, crippled the retreat, destroying bridges, rail yards, and supply depots. The French 2nd Armored Division, under General Charles de Gaulle, attempted a counterattack at Montcornet on May 17, but without adequate air cover, the effort stalled, and de Gaulle's tanks suffered heavy losses. Meanwhile, the German advance continued unabated. The fall of Lille trapped approximately 200,000 Allied soldiers, including the bulk of the BEF, within a pocket surrounded by German forces. In an attempt to rescue these troops, the British launched Operation Dynamo, a daring evacuation from the beaches of Dunkirk, that began on May 26. Over the next 9 days, a flotilla of naval destroyers, merchant ships, and civilian vessels rescued 338,000 soldiers, a remarkable feat that preserved a core of experienced troops for future campaigns. The French political leadership, meanwhile, faced an internal crisis. On May 16, Prime Minister Paul Reynaud replaced Daladier, pledging to continue the fight despite mounting losses. Yet the French army, now reduced to roughly 800,000 men, suffered from shortages of modern equipment. Only 1,300 of its 2,500 tanks were operational, many of which were the obsolete Renault R35 and Hotchkiss H35 models, while the German panzer divisions fielded over 2,000 newer Panzer III and IV tanks. French artillery, though numerically superior, could not compensate for the lack of coordinated air support, and communication failures hampered effective command and control. The Wehrmacht's 5th Panzer Division captured the coastal town of Calais after a ferocious siege, despite British attempts to hold the port. Calais fell on May 26, and the German Navy, although limited, began laying mines in the English Channel, further restricting Allied naval movements. The fall of Boulogne-sur-Mer on May 27 completed the coastal encirclement, leaving the British and French forces trapped in a shrinking pocket around Dunkirk. While the evacuation proceeded, the French government grappled with the reality of defeat. On May 25, Marshal Philippe Pétain, a World War I hero, was appointed Vice Premier and Minister of Defense, tasked with negotiating an armistice. Pétain, believing further resistance would only lead to needless bloodshed, began secret talks with German diplomats, culminating in the signing of the armistice on June 22 at Campine Forest, the same railway carriage where the 1918 armistice had been signed. The terms forced France to surrender territory east of the Seine, demilitarize the Maginot Line, and accept a German occupation zone covering 45% of its land, including Paris. The consequences of the armistice were immediate and profound. Approximately 3.7 million French soldiers were taken prisoner, including 1.5 million in the rapid German advances and 2.2 million during the Dunkirk evacuation. The French economy, already strained by the Great Depression, faced the loss of its industrial heartland in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais region, which supplied half of the nation's steel production. German requisition of French factories supplied the Wehrmacht's war machine, directly contributing to subsequent campaigns in the Balkans and the invasion of the Soviet Union. Internationally, the fall of France shocked the world. Britain, now standing alone against Nazi Germany, entered a period of strategic isolation, prompting Winston Churchill to assume the premiership on May 10, the very day of the German invasion. Churchill's famous "We shall fight on the beaches" speech, delivered on June 4, rallied British morale and signaled a resolve to continue the fight despite the loss of continental allies. The United States, still officially neutral, began to increase its aid to Britain through the Lend-Lease program, laying the groundwork for a future transatlantic partnership. German military doctrine, vindicated by the swift victory, was now codified as the template for future operations. The success of combined arms, tanks, motorized infantry, and close air support demonstrated the effectiveness of rapid penetration and encirclement, concepts later applied in Operation Barbarossa and the North African Campaign. Nevertheless, the German High Command's overconfidence also sowed seeds of strategic error. They underestimated the logistical challenges of sustaining a fast-moving army, a flaw that would later plague the Eastern Front. In the wake of the defeat, French resistance began to coalesce. Intellectuals, former soldiers, and ordinary citizens formed clandestine networks that would later evolve into the French Forces of the Interior, FFI. These groups engaged in sabotage, intelligence gathering, and guerrilla warfare, laying the groundwork for the liberation of France in 1944. Meanwhile, the Vichy regime, led by Pétain, collaborated with the occupiers, instituting policies that led to the persecution of Jews, the forced labor of millions, and the suppression of dissent, casting a long shadow over French society. The Battle of France also reshaped the strategic calculations of other European powers. The Soviet Union, observing the rapid German success, signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact on August 23, 1939 and later entered a non-aggression agreement with Germany, securing territorial gains in Eastern Europe. Italy, under Benito Mussolini, entered the war on the side of the Axis on June 10, hoping to share in the spoils of conquest, though its subsequent campaigns would reveal a starkly different level of military competence. The human cost of the campaign was staggering. German casualties numbered approximately 27,000 killed and 86,000 wounded, a relatively low figure given the scale of the operation, while French and Allied losses exceeded 150,000 killed and 250,000 wounded, not counting the millions of civilians displaced by the fighting and subsequent occupation. The civilian population of northern France endured bombings, forced evacuations, and harsh occupation policies that included rationing, curfews, and the implementation of the Nazi final solution, which led to the deportation of over 75,000 French Jews to extermination camps. In the months following the armistice, the German occupation authorities reorganized French administrative structures, dividing the country into zones: the occupied zone in the north and west, the so-called Free Zone under Vichy control, and the Italian zone in the southeast. This fragmentation facilitated the exploitation of French resources, the conscription of labor for the German war effort, and the suppression of resistance activities. Yet the very division also created a patchwork of jurisdictions that later aided Allied planners in coordinating the D-Day landings and the subsequent push eastward. The legacy of the Battle of France reverberated through post-war memory. French military doctrine underwent a profound reassessment, leading to the development of a more mobile, mechanized force in the Cold War era, while the trauma of defeat informed French foreign policy, fostering a determination to avoid future reliance on alliances perceived as unreliable. The battle also cemented the myth of the phony war, a period of inactivity on the Western Front from September 1939 to May 1940, which obscured the reality that both sides were preparing for the cataclysm that would soon erupt. Ultimately, the Battle of France demonstrated how technological innovation, strategic surprise, and decisive leadership could overturn entrenched defensive thinking, but it also illustrated the dangers of complacency and political disunity. The rapid collapse of a nation once thought invincible left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of Europe, reminding future generations that the outcomes of war hinge not only on weapons and numbers, but on the willingness to adapt, to anticipate, and to confront the unexpected. The echoes of those springtime battles still resonate in the lessons taught to commanders, scholars, and citizens alike.